Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Seats to Streets Church Coaching Podcast. I am your host, J.R. Horn, and I've got a fantastic guest with me this time. Back now on the channel, we were going to bring Andrew on. It's season one. Andrew got busy, COVID hit, and so we decided to make Andrew the leading kickoff for season two of the Seats to Streets podcast. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see Andrew. And if you're listening to us for the first time, I'd encourage you jump over on YouTube, look for Seats to Streets. You'll find our channel, and we're putting all of the podcast episodes online and in this visual format because we want to form a relationship with you. We want you to know who are the weird talking voices in your headphones every time, or who's coming through your car speakers. I know I listen to my podcast a lot of times on the way to and from work, and it's great when I actually get to actually know who a person is. And so we're so glad you're tuning in to the channel. If you haven't already, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe below so that you can be up to date with whenever we release a video. Make sure you hit that bell notification. It will alert you every time we upload to the channel. But I do want to introduce our guest for you today because this is a super treat for all of our Seats to Streets listeners. This is a fantastic tool as you seek to impact your community and grow your church. And with me today, I've got Andrew Esparza from Kingdom Analytics. Andrew, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, JR, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation and excited to be kicking off season two. Should be exciting.
Awesome, man. I'm it's pretty cool to see kind of our relationship grow. I know I stumbled on Kingdom Analytics a year or so ago and was just blown away by what you're able to do. I was able to speak with someone who's already used the tool, use some of the reports and the findings. And actually, next episode coming up next will be a conversation between myself and my co-host Brian Gorman, who's used your exact studies that come out. It's completely revolutionized how they do church, period, from the preaching all the way down. I do want to clue you into that. So if you haven't seen that yet, that's coming next. And if this has already been out for several months, make sure you watch the follow-up episode between Brian and I as we kind of break down what it looks like to actually use the data that comes out of Kingdom Analytics and really put that into practice. But Andrew, why don't you give us a little background? Like, what is Kingdom Analytics and how do you guys work with churches?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a great question. Probably good to start off with that, I guess. Kingdom Analytics, we've been around for several years now, really with the goal of bringing Fortune 500 level big data down to the local church.
Mm-hmm.
So there's tons of different applications there, but it's really saying, hey, how can we use the information that's available to us to help grow the kingdom? And I like talking about in First Chronicles 12, it talks about the tribe of Issachar and the 200 leaders understanding the signs of the times and knowing the best course of action for Israel to take. And that's really what we're trying to get at here. But in our local communities, what are the signs of the times in Memphis, Tennessee, and what's the best course of action for our church to take there or wherever it is? And really just trying to see, okay, hey, what's going on? And how can we reach our community?
That's awesome. I know for me, a lot of times when I'm talking with churches, whenever I'm coaching churches and coaching pastors, there's this deep desire to be the tangible hands and feet of Jesus into their community. There is this deep longing to motivate this entire, giant church family to come along and let's go be a part of being in the harvest field. But sometimes there is a lack of maybe the next step because we don't know what to do because we may not have all of the information. And that's where Kingdom Analytics comes in, is bringing some of that data, some of that information, and making it tangible to churches to use to go, oh, that's exactly where we need to go, or this area is where we need to go to make an impact for the kingdom. So, Andrew, why don't you talk a little bit about this? I know there is you guys make you do like a polygon search around the church and things like that. So what does that look like? Where are you doing research? Say if my church on the corner over here called up, where are you pulling research from around my church so I know that it's what communities that you're actually looking into?
Yeah. So really kind of behind the scenes here, if we're going back behind the curtain, how it works is we'll take a church's address for wherever their campus is. And the first thing we want to do is determine, okay, what is we'll use the term study area, but really it's who is our community. And typically with most churches, that's going to be a 20-minute drive time or less from the
Hmm.
church. And the
Hmm.
reason we use drive times is it's a lot more reflective of who's actually coming to the church versus if we were to do a 10-mile radius everywhere. That's going to look really different in the middle of Nebraska versus downtown Los Angeles.
Hmm.
How far you're actually able to reach. So we use a drive time, and essentially what that allows us to do is say, okay, this is kind of what we see as our community, and this is who we're going to study. So we'll use our access. I always say it sounds a little scary, but we have thousands of data points on every household in America through dozens of different sources, and they're all on our website if you want to check them out. But really, what this allows us to do is look at every single household in our community and get a good picture for, okay, who are we really? And we might have this idea of who we think our community is, and it may look like the neighborhood that we live in particularly,
Hmm.
but really understanding, man, okay, down the streets or across the tracks or whatever that is, what's really going on here. And
Hmm.
then the other cool thing is we can actually take your congregation's address list as well. We don't need no names or anything like that, but just saying, okay, now who are we as a church, and who are we reaching, and who are we not reaching in our community? And there's tons and tons of stuff we can get into on some of that of what we're able to kind of uncover from ministry needs in the community and on all different kinds of things there.
Hmm. That brings me back to one of the previous podcast episodes that we had in season one, where we got to interview a pastor by the name of Britt Wendell. And if you haven't listened to those episodes yet, go back to season one and listen to the series, part one and part two of A Church for the City. It's fantastic to hear his breakdown of, we want to be a church that is surrounded by the people that are around the church building, and we want to impact the city. And I really kind of hear that from you talking about some of this information that you're able to pull to say, does my church match the community that I'm in? And what does that look like for us to not just look like the community, but to effectively reach the community? How do we go about doing that, being good news, the tangible hands and feet of Jesus right outside the doors? I mean, that's massive. That would be fantastic for a church to look and to be able to say, "Oh, I want to make sure that we are being the hands and feet of Jesus in the 20-minute polygon around our church," and things like that. Um, Andrew, tell us a little bit more, maybe about um, what how churches have utilized these reports. And I know you've got a ton on your website. Andrew's got a fantastic amount of information on kingdomanalytics.com that you can go and find out. It's not only just for churches, businesses, nonprofits, schools. I think I saw schools on there, that you're
Yep.
able to create these reports that you're able to give and create a PowerPoint so they can go through and digest all of this. Because I think when you told me before, kind of seeing the man behind the curtain, like you're alluding to earlier, when you pull these data reports, if you printed them all out, it would be like a stack of papers like this tall. And then you whittle
Oh
all the
yeah.
way down and to go, here's the meat and the bones. Like, this is what it looks like. So, how have churches utilized Kingdom Analytics reports in the past, and how has that changed them to be able to reach their community more?
Yeah, well, great question, and good point there with some of the data. I mean, the truth is, it would be really easy for us just to print out all the reports and say, "Hey, here's 400 pages of everything you could ever want to know about your community." But we all know that would just end up as a really big paperweight on
Yeah.
somebody's coffee table somewhere. So kind of what we'll do is we go through and we actually analyze all that information. We pull out, hey, based on what you're looking for. Here's some of the key insights that we think are important. And by the way, hey, if you ever do want to dive into that, typically this is the executive pastors.
Right.
Here's all the raw data that you can go back into and look at it as well. But really, there's several different ways churches use this information. The first way is, of course, just saying, hey, how can we better reach our community? And that's a little bit of kind of what we just talked about, of understanding who our community is and who we are. And is that lining up? We'll compare age, we'll compare ethnicity, we'll compare income, education level. We also talk about mosaics. And if for those listening, if you're not familiar with what mosaics are, the mosaic system is, this is something developed behind closed doors, whether we like it or not, by the credit agencies. And what they've done is essentially grouped every household in America into one of 71 different mosaic types or kind of people groups. And they've used kind of all their information to kind of categorize that, like where we live, where we work, income, behaviors, all these different things that kind of essentially put us into a box. Now, we all know, hey, we're all still individuals. But we're individuals with some similarities. So what we'll do is we'll take kind of that background information and add on a ton of really helpful information for the church, whether that be giving data, religious data, what they're looking for in a worship service. I mean, I always joke, but it's true, is we can get down to, hey, what kind of coffee do these people prefer after service? So what we'll do when community or churches are looking for and saying, hey, how can we better reach our communities? We'll look at the top mosaics in that community and also the top mosaics in that congregation and really start understanding, hey, are we actually reaching our community? We may look like our community, and that's one thing. A lot of people think diversity is just about skin color, but that's a piece of it, where we could all look the same, but we could be thinking totally different and have different preferences and things like that. So really looking at, okay, how can we actually reach our community there? That's one way. Another big way is maybe things are going well and we want to open up a new multi-site campus. Okay, where's the best spot for that to be? And that's where we start getting into some of the tough questions of, okay, we know the mosaics who are really receptive to what we're doing. We know for sure, man, if we plant it here, this is going to be a successful church. The tricky question is, we also know the ones who we are not reaching in our community, and we know where they are too. And now it's, hey, are we the ones who are equipped to go out and reach that community, and trying to kind of balance some of that? I don't have the answers to that question, but we can provide the information to make the decision. I think that's where prayer probably starts kicking in a lot there.
Absolutely. 100%. I actually got to get my hands on a report. You did a special a while back, and I submitted my name for the special to do just to look at a religious or a spiritual study and some social media preferences for a super small report. And you sent me, so I just submitted for our church, the 20-minute around our church in Louisville. And I was able to take that. I was able to give it to the elders, give it to the pastoral staff, and kind of show them what's going on. And man, just the feedback from them of going, we didn't know this, right? Oftentimes you don't, a fish doesn't know his nose is wet until you tell him, right? Because they're in water. And so sometimes we can get into church, and this is why it's so important for pastors. Listen up. This is why it's so important for you to have this data, is that we can get into being managing the church, running the church. Sunday's always coming, right? That was a phrase on staff whenever I was a pastor at a church. It was like, Sunday's coming. Like, we've got to get this going. And so we can kind of get into this rhythm, get in the rhythm. And we just kind of forget some of the outside stuff and some of the things that are going on in our community. We're pastoring, we're caring, we're calling, we're preaching, we're teaching, we're leading a staff, all this stuff. And sometimes outside of our community, we can kind of lose a little bit of touch. And this is where Kingdom Analytics and Andrew come in. I got to look at this study, and you gave me this it was a spiritual synopsis, I think, of in our study. And one of the questions was, do you believe that Jesus that Jesus was an extremely high power son of God, came to earth, lived and died, and returned back to heaven, and is the only way to God, something like that. I know that's not,
Yep.
I'm adding a lot to it. But in 2012, the study said, in the 20-minute drive around our church, that 70% of people said, yes, that's absolutely true. I absolutely agree that Jesus was who he said he was in Scripture, and who other people said he was in Scripture, and such like that. In 2017, evidently there was another spiritual study of that area that went on that you were able to access and give it to us. In 2012, 70% of people said, yes, he is. In 2017, the study was done again 5 years later, and the percentage points dropped 10.4% down to 59.6.
Yeah.
Well, it's been 5 years since 2017. Has it dropped another 10% around our church building? Now, that's not a reflective of an effectiveness of the church. By no means am I saying that. But what I am saying is that sometimes, Pastor, we can get so focused on, because Sunday's coming, that we kind of forget about all the other things that are going on around us. And we need to be reminded of these things. So, Andrew, that's one of the things that you provide. I know you provide other things. We've even talked about you're even able to highlight, I believe, on a map, low income neighborhoods, as well as a high percentage of maybe single parent homes,
Right.
single parent families, so that we can actually able to see on a map, like this zip code, or this 10 by 10 block square radius is a high concentration of single parent families. Statistically speaking, single parent families is the children at a high risk of either going into foster care or in human trafficking, because
Yeah.
we need we need two adults to be able to help and to work and to have the income. And I get it. But these are some of the things that Kingdom Analytics are able to provide. What does that look like? What are some of what is the feedback you've got from churches when they get this data, when they get your report and you've presented it to them? At the end of it, what are some of their reactions?
Yeah. So it's usually one of two things. The first, which they're kind of split 50-50, and it could be even within people in the same room at the same church. And the first is, I thought I knew some of that, but this was really good to actually get some numbers. And hey, there were a couple things that we weren't aware about, but that it makes total sense now. The other kind of side that we see sometimes is, I was convinced that our church of 90% white people was totally reaching our community that we just discovered is 70% Hispanic. And there's a huge kind of unveiling almost of, wow, what else am I kind of missing there? So those are kind of the two main reactions we typically see, and they're all good, because we're learning, we're getting a better understanding, we're seeing what's going on. You can see this. I mean, it's kind of like saying, hey, where's God moving in our community? How can we be a part of that as a church? I mean, you mentioned the single family, single parent homes. And man, I would encourage every pastor out there, if there's single parents in your congregation, your community, what we know from some of our information is there's a 50% chance they're living below the poverty level. So if you see a single mom walking in on Sunday, there's probably a ministry opportunity there at least, for sure. And that's something we like to focus on a lot. And you had mentioned the belief about Jesus. That's unfortunately, that's something that's not unique to your community. Out of the we're getting close to 400 of these studies now, and every single one, I have not seen a single community where belief in Jesus has increased over time. And we're just getting some of those 2021 numbers now. And unfortunately, that trend's continuing. So that's really why, essentially, what we're doing, and why the church, I'm sure, is doing what they're doing, is saying, hey, how can we better reach our community and grow the kingdom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is impactful, and it is overwhelming at times when we see these reports. I'm like, man, what? Wow, there's a lot of work that we need to do for the kingdom. And what the beauty of that is that what Kingdom Analytics can do is to be able to take all this information, whether it's we've known it or not known it, and they're able to condense it all down as a bullseye for you and your church, so that they can put the bullseye on the board to say that's what we're aiming at. Like that's what we're going for. I know some pastors like just recoil at the words like data and things like this, and then you're talking about the credit companies have profiled us all and all this, all these searches that you're bringing in, and there's 400 pages of reports. Andrew's not sending you 400 pages of reports. Andrew breaks it all down into actionable data, percentage points, top one, twos, and threes, areas and maps, all in a PowerPoint that is easily accessible for you, and that you're able to digest, and sometimes even digest over time because you can have it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a link below in the description of what a sample report looks like, so that you're not just looking at a giant list of things. It's approachable. You can see it and to know exactly what type of information that you are going to be able to get. And talking about that, Andrew, I know we had talked about before we get into a special treat for our listeners I want to talk about some interesting church trends that you're just now finding, maybe on the amidst COVID or back into COVID, however you want to look at that. But what are some of the church trends that you're seeing during this specific season of ministry right now?
Yeah, there's a couple, and really the first one we're spending a lot of time researching, and that is in America today, we all have this second job that we don't really know we have. And really what it is what we found is the average American is spending 8 hours a day looking at screens outside of work. So this isn't even including what we're doing now. This is just kind of different distractions: TV, laptop, cell phone, things like that. And what we're finding is when we're doing these studies and looking at, one of the things we'll do is we'll dive into the community. We'll look at people who aren't in the church or who don't go to church and say, hey, what are some of the reasons? What do you think about the church? Why don't you go? And almost always in the top three, we see there's just no time available. And what's happening is, I mean, it's almost gone out of screw tape letters in a way, is we're just being distracted to where
Mm-hmm.
we're working hard trying to uh, make an income, provide for our families. We get to the weekend and we don't realize it, but we've really worked two jobs based on the amount of time we've spent on screen, things like that. So when it comes to Sunday, you'll see things like, hey, there's no time, or I need to spend
Mm-hmm.
time with my family and things like that. And that's another thing, is a lot of people don't associate the church with being that place to spend time with their kids. And there's a whole bunch we can talk about there of, hey, how can the church be the go-to place for that?
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting trend that we've seen just this year, really, it's kind of immersed, kind of if we are post COVID, I guess wherever we are now, kind of coming out of some of the lockdowns, I guess is
Sure.
safe to say.
Right.
But what we're seeing is, and a lot of churches are lining up at the door for this, is a potential new model for the church. Now, we all know the hybrid model is probably here to stay,
Mm-hmm.
but there's now also a lot of churches, and your church may be one where, hey, there's we're sitting on 30-40 acres or 10 acres, whatever it is, and we're using one or two of those one day a week. How can we better steward the land that we have and that was given to us, to, like we were talking about before, to reach our communities? So what we've started to do is we've actually partnered with developers and things like that, but we've started using some of this data and information to not just say, hey, what are these people looking for in the church and things like that, which is definitely still the main focus, but also what would be the best land use for this area. And hey, maybe a senior housing development or a Chick-fil-A works really well because the parking lot's available on Sunday. And we do a lease, essentially a lease with the church, where it's, hey, it's no cost to them. They still own the land, 99-year lease, but there's two benefits. We're getting people onto the campus, and we're also getting monthly ministry income. And these developers, these guys know what they're doing. These are people who've worked on Disney, Universal. They're good friends of mine, things like that. So it's not just, hey, we're going to just plop this here on the campus and you're going to get a bunch of dumpsters facing you. It's no, hey, the church is the focus. How can we draw the community into us and also have sustaining ministry income? So that's something that man's just starting to kind of take off a little bit. It's really exciting, and it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And the last trend is something we kind of touched on earlier, just that belief in Jesus and in the community. And you mentioned that report, and there's a bunch of different indicators there of one we always like to focus on is, do you believe Jesus died and rose from the dead? And that's where we're kind of seeing that constant decrease. But in all those studies, we look at beliefs about God, all different kinds of beliefs, and you can really start to dive in and understand, okay, what do these people actually believe? Because my guess is you'll look at that study and you'll say, okay, was 60% believe that he died and rose from the dead, but it might say only 40% believe he's the only way for human salvation for sin. And you kind of start to understand, okay, hey, here's what's really going on. Here's what these people think, and things like that. But like I said, that's why we're doing what we're doing, and why I'm sure you guys are doing what you're doing, is just saying, hey, how can we use this information to grow the kingdom?
Yeah, it really does. It really, the information that Andrew's able to provide in these reports really can shape how you choose to go about evangelism and discipleship. How do you do your local and global missions? What does it look like for us to be the church in our community? And this is the whole goal for Seats to Streets Church Coaching, is that we want to give you resources to move your people from Sunday morning seats to local and global streets. And one of those resources is having the awareness and knowledge that you can have companies and organizations like Kingdom Analytics be able to find this information about your church community, and you can shape what you do right there on the spot. So that's why we wanted to have Andrew on so earlier in the year. And here's the treat that we have for all of our Seats to Streets listeners. If you are listening to this between now and the end of 2021, we want to be able to give you a discount on these reports. So Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about one or two reports that you have for churches, maybe the difference between like a gold, silver level and bronze level, and then what does that discount look like for churches?
Definitely, yeah, and we're excited to provide this just because we believe, man, I mean, it's not doing us any good to sit on this information, and getting it in the hands of church leaders is the way to go. So however we can get it out to as many people as possible is what we want to do. So there's all kinds of different packages. I kind of equate it to going to college. You can go to college and you can take a class and you'll learn a lot, and that will be great. Or you can go and get your degree. So there's all levels of data based on how deep you want to get and what you want to look at. One of the ones we've talked about before is what we call the community consensus report. That's kind of going to be our starter report, where, hey, we learn a little bit about our community, and we kind of dive into what's the needs, what are these people dealing with, what's going on at home, what are the ministry needs of our community. Great for sermon topics. We hear all the time where pastors will have people come up to them after when they've talked about some of this and say, hey, are you reading my diary? How did you know I was struggling with that? Or I really needed to hear that. And we'll basically uncover, hey, what's going on behind closed doors in the community. What are people struggling with? Some of the other reports, the gold reports, where we really dive into everything in the community, demographics, psychographics, how people think, what they believe, things like that, but also the congregation itself. And that's really where you get a lot of the value. I'd say if you have a congregation of over 100 people or so, that's where you're going to get some of the value of understanding, okay, who are we? And who are we reaching? How can we reach more of our community? And we'll do all the same stuff, looking at the community and ministry needs and things like that with that there. So the discount we want to provide is kind of two things. One being just a Seats to Streets podcast listener partner discount, where, hey, you can get 10% off any of these services. But also, I know, I mean, we just touched the tip of the iceberg here.
Totally.
Every community is a little different. if you have questions, you want to learn a little more and kind of just get some quick insights about your community and kind of talk through some of this and how it might work for your community, we're also opening up free consultations for all the listeners as well. So if you're interested in that, you can go to our website, kingdomanalytics.com. I put at the very bottom, it's kind of hidden in a way so that only you guys can see it, but it'll just say free consultation at the very bottom there. Click that. You can fill out your information and just put Seats to Streets listener in the notes, and we'll get in contact with you pretty quickly there and can have some conversations and talk a little bit more about what's going on in your community.
That's awesome, man. We are very privileged to be able to have you on the podcast and to be able to extend more just the discount to be our churches is fantastic. The information and the data alone, the how you present it is extremely valuable enough, but then to care for even churches to go, hey, we want to make sure this is even more accessible. Let's knock some of the price down a little bit. That's awesome. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in this, go to kingdomanalytics.com and look over what Andrew does with Kingdom Analytics. It's fantastic. And then scroll to the bottom, sign up for that free consultation to say, hey, Andrew, this is my church. This is what our community looks like. And this is what I really want to learn about and to know. The more information that you can give to Andrew to funnel his research and to funnel the data that he gives back to you, it's going to make it more impactful for you and your church. So we are so glad you're here. That's it for this episode of the Seats to Streets Church Coaching Podcast. We are so glad you have stuck with us. If you have a question and about how you can reach your community, if you are doing something so phenomenal that it is going super well in your community, here's what we want you to do. We want you to go down below and make a comment. And leave a comment. What are you doing that is making a super impact to grow the kingdom of God in your community? We would love to know. When you hear things like that Jesus is the only way to heaven has dropped 10 percentage points in 5 years, those are hurtful as a pastor. What are you doing that you're seeing so much fruit that it's going to raise that number? We would love to know and share. So drop a comment below so that all the other listeners and the other people that are tuning into the channel later on will see what's going on to go, oh, hey, maybe we should look into that. We would love to be able to see those and be able to celebrate those with you. So we're so glad you're with us. That's it. We will see you next time when I have a conversation with Brian Gorman about how they've taken this specific data from Kingdom Analytics, used it in their church, and completely changed what they've done. Their preaching, their mission, their vision, how they talk to someone, their evangelism, all of it has been changed because of what Andrew's been able to provide from Kingdom Analytics about the 20-minute circle around their church. All right, folks, we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.